Hello and welcome to GED Live at PALS, to the second part of the GED Science Practice Test 2 in 2021. If you find these videos helpful to prepare you for your GED Science test or our other videos for your general GED Science exams, ring the bell so you get all the information about our new uploads and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So let's continue with our test 2. Question 18 on the test. There are 4 basic types of chemical reactions as shown in the table below: combination, decomposition, single displacement and double displacement. We see general examples of these 4 reactions. Here, combination, for example, A plus B gives C. The balanced chemical equation describing the reaction between hydrogen and fluorine is shown below. H2 plus F2 gives 2HF. Which of the basic 4 types of chemical reactions is this? We can see here that we start off with 2 substances, H2 and F2. They react with each other and one product forms, HF. Hydrogen plus fluorine gives hydrogen fluoride. That means we have an addition or a combination reaction in this style here. That means our correct answer is a combination reaction. Question 19 refers to the following graph. Projected AIDS deaths 2011 to 2020 in different countries, Africa, South, or different continents, Africa, South, Southeast Asia, East Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, North America, Northern Europe. According to the chart above, which of the following regions will have the largest projected increase in the number of AIDS deaths between 2011 and 2020? Africa, South, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, North America, or Northern Europe. We have to read carefully here. This is a bit misleading, a tricky question. It says and asks which will have the largest projected increase. So we are not looking for the largest numbers in general, we are looking for the largest increase, projected increase. And we can see that in this case, an obvious answer to give here would be Africa, because Africa has the highest numbers in general, but we can see that the projected increase in South and Southeast Asia, we have an exponential rise here, whereas the others, in East Asia Pacific, we have an increase as well, but we can see that this one is steeper and at a higher number. So projected increase, the strongest rise we have in South and Southeast Asia, answer B. 20 scientists classify stars according to the following categories: O, B, A, F, G, K, M. A star's category depends upon its spectral type, which is determined by its temperature. The chart below shows 5 stars of different categories along with their temperatures. We have an O, B, A, F, and G star, and here we see the temperatures of these. O, the hottest, and then decreasing temperatures to G with the lowest temperature in this table. However, rather than measuring star temperature in degree Fahrenheit, scientists typically measure star temperature in units of Kelvin. The conversion from Kelvin to Fahrenheit is given by the following formula. Kelvin equals 5/9 in brackets degree Fahrenheit minus 32 plus 273. That's the conversion formula to change Fahrenheit into Kelvin, absolute temperature scale. What is the approximate temperature of the A-type star in Kelvin? You may use a calculator. So what do? We simply use this formula. We put in the temperature for our placeholder here. We put that into the calculator and we should get the correct answer. So what do? 5 over 9 in brackets. Class A is 4,839 minus 32 plus 273. Typing all of that into your calculator, you get 2,944, and that is, or actually we get a calculator 2,943.55, correctly rounded. No, we round up to 2,944, and that is answer D. Question 21 and 22 refer to this graph below. Waves that foretell tidal waves. Seismometer readings of Earth motion from the fault city quake reflect much larger long-period surface waves at point R1 than those from the Nicaragua quake. According to the information above, which of the following statements is true? The Nicaragua main quake had a larger amplitude than did the fault city quake. The fault city main quake had a larger amplitude than did the Nicaragua quake. A seismometer was used to measure the Nicaragua quake, but was not used to measure the fault city quake. Well, we can exclude that one. Both were determined by a seismometer. It says here seismometer readings for both quakes, Nicaragua and fault city. The long period surface waves at the point R1 were larger during the Nicaragua quake than during the fault city quake. Okay, let's see what we have here. So, let's have a look at D first. It says the long period surface waves at point R1. R1 is here. Were larger during the Nicaragua quake than during the fault city quake. So let's check which ones are larger. Now, we can definitely see fault city larger than Nicaragua, so let's exclude answer D. So A or B, fault city main quake had a larger amplitude, Nicaragua main quake had a larger amplitude. So what is an amplitude? If we draw a wave, the middle line is the resting position of the wave, then the amplitude is the height of the wave from the resting position to the highest point, or from the resting position to the lowest point. That is the amplitude. So we're basically asking ourselves which wave is higher. So we have the resting position more or less here. In this wave, the resting position more or less here. And let's check which wave is higher. This is the highest point here. This is the highest point here. We can see that the fault city quake had a larger amplitude. This much compared to this much. That means we can cross out A. Nicaragua didn't have a larger amplitude, so the correct answer is B. The fault city quake had a larger amplitude. Question 22, still on the same graph. Select the point on the graph that would be of the most importance in foretelling an earthquake in Nicaragua. So we mark an X for the point that is most important in foretelling a quake. So for that, we really have to look, I think, again up here in the information that we get. It tells us seismometer readings of Earth motion from the Salt City quake reflect much larger long period surface waves at point R than those from the Nicaragua quake. So in both cases we have the R1 small quakes at R1, and then at R2 we have the main quake. Question is foretelling the earthquake in Nicaragua. That means we should mark an X at R1 in the Nicaragua graph. R1 is the only quake or point before the main quake. R2, R3, 4 and 5 are all after the main quake. '23 and 24 refer to the following article. For years, paleontologists have debated whether the Archaeopteryx, a creature that lived 150 million years ago, was an early species of bird or a dinosaur that spent most of its time on the ground. Its feathers and wings were of only limited use, they say, and could not sustain flight. Ornithologists, on the other hand, believe that Archaeopteryx was first and foremost a bird. As evidence, they point to fossil remains of the creature that show its claws were curved so that it could perch on tree limbs. Curved claws would have prevented the animal from walking or running quickly on the ground. According to paleontologists, the Archaeopteryx was incapable of perching, running, flying, or walking. So what do the paleontologists say? They say there was an early species of bird, dinosaur spent most of its time on the ground. Its feathers and wings were of only limited use, could not sustain flight. So, according to archaeologists, according to paleontologists, Archaeopteryx was incapable of flying. According to the theory advanced by ornithologists, which of the following is most likely to have been a modern-day descent of the Archaeopteryx? So which is a related species to the Archaeopteryx species? The lizard, the alligator, the cow, the mosquito. The crow, sorry, not the cow. I got myself confused here. So the only, again, ornithologists, they are people who study birds, and they believe that Archaeopteryx was foremost a bird. So if Archaeopteryx was a bird, it's most likely that the crow is a direct relative of the Archaeopteryx, or the closest related to the Archaeopteryx. In science, work is defined as the component of force parallel to motion multiplied by displacement. One reason that individuals use ramps rather than lifting heavy items straight up is that using a ramp increases total displacement but reduces the amount of force required to move an object by exactly the same amount as the increase in displacement, provided that the ramp's surface is frictionless. According to the information in the paragraph, using a ramp with a frictionless surface will have which of the following effects? Again, what does the paragraph tell us? Reduces the amount of force required to move an object, exactly the same amount, by increasing the displacement. So, the total amount of work required to move an object will decrease. The total amount of work required to move an object will increase. The total amount of work required to move the object will remain the same. The amount of work required to move an object will initially increase, but later decrease. So it says in the text, as we said already, using a ramp will increase the total displacement, but reduces the amount of force required to move an object by exactly the same amount. That means we will need exactly the same amount of work done. So the correct answer here is the total amount of work required will remain the same. Yes, C. Now we can simplify that a little bit by looking at the formula of work done. The formula of work done is work is equal to force times displacement. If we increase the distance, the displacement, to do the same amount of work, we will need a reduced amount of force. So the amount of energy transferred will remain the same. Work done is the same as energy transfer. Below is a table listing the concentrations of chemicals found in human blood and urine. We have albumin, chloride, glucose, phosphate and urea, all in the blood, certain amounts, and in the urine we only find chloride, phosphate and urea. Based on the table above, which of the following chemicals is not normally found in urine? What is not found in urine? We don't find albumin and we don't find glucose in urine. Albumin and glucose. In a certain forest, foxes prey on rabbits. A virus that infects only rabbits spreads through the forest, killing many rabbits. Which of the following is most likely to occur to the fox population? Well, rabbits get infected by viruses, so many rabbits die, which means there's less food for foxes. How will that affect the foxes? The fox population will decrease because the foxes will not have enough food. That sounds very reasonable. It will decrease because the foxes will suffer from the virus. Nope, the virus affects rabbits only. It doesn't say anything that the virus is able to jump from rabbits to foxes, so we can exclude B. It will increase because the foxes will no longer need to compete with the rabbits for food. Foxes don't compete with rabbits, they eat rabbits. It will increase because the foxes will evolve to become more resistant to disease. Again, the virus doesn't affect the foxes. So the correct answer here is A. A solar eclipse is a celestial event during which the sun appears partially or totally obscured when viewed from a certain location on Earth. The diagram below shows a solar eclipse. You standing here, basically on that red point, and the moon is between you and the sun. Based on the information above, which of the following is most likely to be true during a solar eclipse? The entire moon is in the penumbra or shadow of the Earth, so that the moon is no longer visible from the Earth. The moon is directly between the sun and the Earth, thus placing certain regions of Earth within the moon's umbra, shadow, or deepest part of the shadow, so that the sun's rays are not visible from these regions. That exactly describes what we see on the illustration above, so that's probably the correct answer. Anyway, let's have a look at C and D. Light rays from the Earth. There are no light rays sent by the Earth, only from the sun. Anyway, light rays from the Earth intercept those from the sun, thus creating an umbra or dark shadow around the moon. Okay, well, that just doesn't make sense at all here. The sun is in the umbra, or deepest part of the shadow cast by the Earth, and is therefore invisible from the Earth. No. There is no shadow cast on the sun because the sun is the source of light. So it's not D, and the entire moon is in the penumbra or shadow of the earth, so that the moon is no longer visible from the earth. Well, that is actually a good statement here, which is reasonable. But statement A doesn't describe a solar eclipse, it describes a lunar eclipse. That happens when the moon moves into the umbra of the earth. If that happens, we have a lunar eclipse if the moon directly moves into the shadow cast by the earth. 29 and 30 refer to the following passage. Pathogenic microbes, microorganisms that cause disease, include viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. Viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa, disease-causing organisms, pathogenic microbes. Such microbes can invade hosts through several pathways, including through the air, through direct or indirect physical contact, through blood, and through other bodily fluids. Medical researchers are currently attempting to find better treatments for microbial disease by developing new pharmaceuticals. Currently, many doctors prescribe penicillin, which is derived from the spores of a fungus and which prevents the growth of new bacteria, to treat bacteria-induced microbial disease. And antiviral compounds to combat viruses. However, such treatments do not always eradicate the relevant disease, and while some microbe-induced illnesses, such as the chickenpox, may not be life-threatening, others, such as those that cause Ebola, can be deadly. Below is a chart of some common microbe-induced illnesses and their causes. Common cold, caused by the rhinovirus, strep throat by streptococcal bacterium, athlete's foot by candida yeast, and malaria by the malaria protist. Which of the following is most likely treatable with penicillin? Okay, what did we learn about penicillin? Penicillin is derived from spores from a fungus, and it prevents the growth of new bacteria to treat bacteria-induced microbial disease. Penicillin is an antibiotic. Antibiotics only work against bacteria. The only illness that is caused by bacteria is strep throat. So that is our answer. All the others have nothing to do with bacteria, so penicillin won't work against the common cold, it won't work against athlete's foot, and it won't work against malaria. Next question is based on the same text. Medical researchers fear that preventing those suffering from microbial diseases from having physical contact with others may not be sufficient to stop the spread of such diseases. Which of the following quotes from the passage supports this idea? Okay, preventing those from suffering microbial disease from having physical contact with others may not be sufficient to stop the spread of the disease. Which quote from the passage supports this idea? Many doctors prescribe penicillin, which is derived from spores, fungus, which the growth of new bacteria, to treat bacteria-induced microbial disease. This has nothing to do with the spread of certain diseases. It's just about penicillin kills bacteria. Nothing to do with preventing the spread of disease. Such treatments do not always eradicate the relevant diseases, and while some microbe-induced illnesses such as chickenpox may not be life-threatening, others such as Ebola can be deadly, okay. Again, it just tells us that some diseases are more dangerous than others. It has nothing to do with the spread of disease. Pathogenic microbes, microorganisms that cause disease, include viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. Again, this answer has nothing to do with the spread of disease. Let's check if D makes sense. Such microbes can invade hosts through several pathways, including through the air, through direct or indirect physical contact, through blood, and through other bodily fluids. So, medical, why is it not enough to avoid having physical contact to stop spreading a disease? Because a disease can as well spread through the air, through blood, and through other bodily fluids. Answer D makes perfectly sense. Hereditary traits are encoded by genes that are located on chromosomes. Chromosomes come in pairs, and the pair of genes for a particular feature determines the characteristics of that trait. In many cases, genes exhibit a pattern called classical dominance. In such cases, the gene for a dominant trait is always expressed when present. An individual may have only a dominant gene and have 2 copies of that gene, or an individual may be a hybrid and have 1 dominant gene and 1 recessive. In hybrids, the dominant gene hides the expression of the recessive one. The recessive gene is expressed only when both copies of the gene are recessive. In literature, dominant genes are represented by capital letters. The recessive genes are represented by lowercase letters. So what we are told here is that, again, first sentence, hereditary traits are encoded by genes that are located on chromosomes. Chromosomes come in pairs. That means for every gene we have 2 versions. So that means, the pair of genes for a particular feature determines the characteristics of that specific trait. Now, genes in classical dominance patterns, we have 2 versions of the gene, a dominant and a recessive one. If the dominant is present, it will always be expressed. The recessive one will only be expressed if there is no dominant version of the gene present. In pea plants, pea color is a hereditary trait. Green comes from a dominant gene and yellow comes from a recessive gene, so that if a plant has 1 gene for green and 1 for yellow, that plant will produce green peas, as we have just learned. If we have green and yellow present, green is dominant, so we will get green peas. The following Punnett square shows the results when 2 hybrid pea plants produce new plants. The Punnett squares predict the likelihood of a specific gene combination occurring. Approximately 75% of the offspring in this case are green and the rest are yellow. Let's have a look at this Punnett square here. These are the possible combinations for the offspring. Big G is green. Big G, small g will be green as well. This will be green as well, as it told us in the text. 1 dominant, 1 recessive will give the dominant color only. This one will be yellow. Now, the lowercase letter is used for recessive genes and the capital letters are used to represent the dominant genes. Which of the following is the best explanation for the result displayed in the Punnett square? 1 parent plant had only the yellow gene. 1 parent plant had only the dominant gene. Neither parent plant had hidden gene for yellow. Both parent plants were hybrids and carried the hidden gene for yellow. Now, to get this result in our Punnett square, both parents need to have 1 capital G and 1 lowercase g, capital, lowercase. Only in this situation, we are able to get the combination for yellow here. So that means the correct answer here is D. Both parent plants were hybrids. Again, a hybrid carries both versions, dominant and recessive. 32 refers to the same information. Dimples result from a dominant gene and a lack of dimples results from a recessive gene. So, dimples, dominant, no dimples, recessive. Based on the information in the passage, which of the following will be true for an individual who is a hybrid? So, dimples, big D, no dimples, small d. That's our parent. That is a hybrid. That individual will have dimples. That individual has an equal chance of either having or not having dimples. That individual will have a dimple on one side, but not on the other. That individual will have no dimples. The correct answer here is obviously A. Now we have learned if the dominant allele is present, it is always expressed. The dominant gene hides the expression of the recessive. 33 and 34 refer to the following graph and paragraph. The graph below shows a science experiment in which a sample of ice at minus 20 degrees Celsius is heated to 120 degrees Celsius. During the experiment, the ice melted into water and then the water boiled and turned into steam. Based on the information presented above, which of the following statements is most accurate? The temperature of the sample increased at the same rate throughout the experiment. Let's have a look. It increased, then stopped, increased, stopped, increased. So it did not increase at the same rate throughout the whole experiment. Plus, we can see the increase down here in the ice is slower. Here it's faster when the water is heating up. The sample remained as ice throughout the most of the experiment. No, ice was only here before melting. We have ice. After that, we have, or up until that point when all the ice is melted, then we have water, so most of the experiment was not ice. The sample increased in temperature, then melted, then increased in temperature again, then boiled, and then increased in temperature. That sounds very reasonable. We have an increase in temperature, it melts, we have another increase in temperature, it boils, and we have another increase in temperature. Just for the sake of making sure, let's check D. The sample melted and increased in temperature at the same time. We can see if we look at the process of melting that while the substance is melting, while the ice is melting, the temperature remains stable. So answer D is wrong as well. Select the area on the graph during which the entire sample consists of liquid water. Select the area on the graph during which the entire sample consists of liquid water. Well, it is during C, that's when we have water. During B, we have ice and water, it's melting at that time. During D, we have steam and water, since the water is boiling. So only in C, part C of the graph, all of it is water. Last question. Bees are insects that play an important role in an ecosystem that has flowering plants. Bees serve as primary pollinators and enable flowering plants to reproduce. Scientists estimate that nearly 1/3 of the human food supply consists of plants that depend on bees for pollination. Based on the information above, which characteristic of bees is most important to an ecosystem? Play an important flowering plants. Bees serve primary pollinators. Bees are pollinators, enable flowering plants to reproduce. Bees create honey for human consumption. Yeah, that's true, but that's not what is important for the ecosystem. Bees serve as pollinators. That sounds very good. Bees sting harmful insects. Not interesting for the ecosystem. Bees transfer their genes to plants. They definitely don't. They transfer pollen from one plant to another and serve as pollinators. The correct answer is B. That was part 2 of the GED Science Practice Test 2 in 2021. If this was helpful for you and helped you preparing for your GED Science test, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the bell so you get all the notifications when we upload new content. I wish you all the best in your GED Science test, and I hope to see you in my next video. Goodbye.